It is messier, but I do like the fact it pulls the reins completely back on the inter-county managers.
Well, definitely, and it's completely radical reform from what we have currently, which I would have imagined was the objective of having a fixture task force in the first place.
Mickey Hart here. You're listening to the GAA Hour football show.
The GAA Hour with Colin Parkinson is brought to you by Paddy Power, home of the Money Back Special.
I'm not finished yet. It took me a long time to get here.
So Conor, we had to do a show today off the back of the CPA press conference yesterday, which completely took me by surprise now. I swear, I was like, what the hell is going on? I was sitting nice and relaxed. I was even relaxed about the Tier 2. I was like, this task force has it under control. It's been given a blank canvas. John Horne's going to look a little bit silly by pushing in his Tier 2. It's all going to count for nothing. They're working away in the background and we'll know what their findings are very soon. So, now as it turns out, we might not get the reform that we're after, because the CPA said yesterday in a press conference, they said in their statement, our contention is that the task force is a Trojan horse designed to give cover to the GAA authorities to ratify the status quo, while having the appearance of consultation and thoughtful deliberation. In reality, it will simply be a ratification process for the newly introduced Tier 2 football championship and retention of the Super 8s. What the hell is after happening here?
Yeah. I mean, no more than yourself. I was quite relaxed about even the state of play next year with regards to the championship and stuff like that, because although the Tier 2 has been rubber stamped, we all knew that a fixtures task force with the right people, with representatives that we've been calling for a long time, we're going to all get in a room together and work out something for the best of everybody. And now when you see the level of detail in the CPA statement, it just calls into question the entire process.
The entire process. And Jesus, it's just hard to know, because there's going to be options on this report, the task force report, and we're going to have 3 options, and these were leaked a few weeks ago, and there's some good ones in it, like flip the season around. This is my one,
like
Conor.
One, yeah.
I'm going to brag about this. Well, I know I like it because it's mine. Not only do I brag about the offensive mark, I brag about this one as well. This is just flipping what's already there. It keeps everybody happy. So you play the provincials early season, and then you play the championship based off the 4 divisions in the league. I'm fairly sure that's one of them. Another one is the provincial football championships are retained, but the borders are relaxed. And I have a feeling this was Kieran Whelan years ago wrote this in the Evening Herald. He went like conferences, 8 8s.
Yeah.
And some team from Ulster goes into Connacht, 2 from Leinster goes into Connacht. So you have, starting with the exact same teams, and, it's played off like that. Then there's other kind of options that were mooted a month ago, where you either finish the season in the end of July and then start club, or you play them concurrently, where you've the mixing together. And first of all, I was of the opinion that you have to end one and start another, and now I'm starting to think, is it nearly better play them concurrently, because the inter-county managers wouldn't have the same power. The commitment levels wouldn't be there, because you go back to your club and you have a handier week than, but it would be very hard to police that as well, So I don't envy the task force's job. There's no doubt it's not easy to find something that's going to keep everybody happy.
Yeah, so some of the suggestions, the thing with me is they sound great on paper, but I don't really know how I'd react to them until I actually see them in practice. Because let's say the one with the concurrent club and county windows, I think that I'd be interested to see how it works, but I'd be just afraid that after a while, the inter-county managers would just, exert their control again, and just, that the clubs wouldn't see.
Well, for club league games, you wouldn't probably train with them, For a championship match, you might. So it is messier, but I do like the fact it pulls the reins completely back on the inter-county managers.
Well, definitely, and it's completely radical reform from what we have currently, which I would have imagined was the objective of having a fixture task force in the first place. That there's an acknowledgement that it needs to be changed. So here, listen, this is completely radical, but let's give it a go and see how it's going to work. But
and the CPA are talking about some status quo in their statement, and just to find out what the hell they're talking about with that, we have Micheal Briody, who's the CPA chairman, on the line now. Micheal, how's it going?
Hello, how you doing, Colin?
Geez, that was a bit drastic yesterday. Came as a huge shock to me, I'm sure to everybody else as well.
Yeah, well, I suppose it had to be drastic. I suppose the reason we took that decision, and we didn't take it lightly, we only took it last week, because I sat on only this day week, last Wednesday week, we sat on a meeting of the task force, And I suppose we just culminated, and we looked at all the sort of submissions we had put through, and the reaction we were getting, and I think tonight is the final meeting of the Taskforce, and they're finalising the report. And I suppose our biggest fear, right, and what we really think is happening here, is that the report is really just a disguise, or it's kind of a cover.
Yeah,
for
a Trojan horse,
a Trojan horse, so to speak, for the status quo to be retained. There is one version, one of the three options on the report is called the improved status quo, which is really just sort of the status quo that it is with the tier 2 as it is. It still retains the Super 8s. So, I mean, it looks as if a lot of those decisions that were made at recent special congresses are going to be retained, and then the other options may not be supported. There's no guarantee they'll be supported. So we wanted to put it out there to the membership of the CPA, but even to the wider GAA, that there's a huge appetite for change, and it needs to be recognised that going with the improved status quo is not satisfactory, and it's certainly not something that the CPA are willing to sign their name with.
Okay, so just so that people listening are completely on top of this, so the report is out next week. The last meeting is tonight. The report is going to recommend 3 different championship restructures. Am I right? One, as myself and Conor were explaining, because this was leaked about a month ago before Congress, one is going to be flipping the season around, where provincials are played early in the year, then is the league, a league championship. The other is evening up the provincial championships, having 8 in every province and playing it off like that. And then the third one, importantly, is to keep the status quo with a couple of improvements, which probably means John Horan's tier 2 and maybe moving the under 20s up the year. So there's 3 now going to come out of that report that John Horan's going to bring to Central Council. Your big concern is that Central Council are going to choose the status quo and the other 2 are going to be thrown by the wayside. Just to explain it for everybody at home, am I right on that?
Yeah, that's it in broad strokes. Without getting into the details of the ones, because the versions may be tweaked somewhat yet. I mean, as I say, the report is not final, so, and I don't want to break confidentiality of the task force and the other members of it, right?
But how can you be so sure that the status quo one is going to be accepted? You're guessing that. One of the other 2 improved versions could be accepted by Central Council.
Yeah, but I suppose we've been trying to put forward improvements, and we haven't tried to improve the status quo because we said there's no point in having the task force even looking at it. Yeah, we've tried to improve the other ones as well, and basically they're not judging them on the merits. They could be better. So for them to be able to challenge the status quo, they need to be the best they can be, right? And they need to be able to get through the monster that is Congress. So for them to do that, it needs to be the best versions of them, right? So unfortunately here, what the report is not going to really sort of give direction on is a path forward for the report and the various options to go to clubs or even to Congress. There's no guarantee that anything other than the improved status quo will go to Congress next year. And Central Council, we say the report will go to John Horan and he will bring it to Central Council this weekend, as we believe. But you or I might never see it beyond that, right?
But this is the thing. Do you think you've jumped the gun by jumping out now rather than wait for that to happen? I completely agree with you. If Central Council agree on the status quo, I think it's time for a revolt. Absolutely. But why do it now when their intentions could potentially be good? They might want change.
Well, I suppose myself and Michael Higgins had to judge that from attending the meetings and seeing what the reaction is. There obviously is sort of some people on the committee that are insiders, and are and very much defending the status quo and saying all the great changes that happened, in recent years. And there has been some incremental change that have been positive for everyone, right? But you can't sort of kind of sell a pup, the way, and kind of say, well, look, it's great, isn't it? Everyone has been looking at this, from for quite a few years since the qualifiers came in. that there is a better way of doing this, right? And that the amount of space, if you look at everything from when the qualifiers were brought in, from the Super 8s were brought in, the new hurling changes, all of that is just added onto the inter-county calendar, right?
Yeah.
Nothing has ever been taken away, right? We heard yesterday even there's an announcement of the international rules again. That where does that fit on the calendar? Like, that's invariably going to be taken off club weeks, right? So like we can try and do everything, and they more or less sort of wrote, where we were disappointed, they wrote the three main models that they're putting forward, despite getting submissions from ourselves with the main ones that put up alternatives, but equally too, there were some brilliant ones from the public, which we kind of looked at and says, God, that's a bit better than ours, right? We'll adopt some of that and put it in, and we've evolved our models over the course of the Taskforce. And I just think, all the hard work that was done by individuals in the public, it just needs to be sort of recognized. It needs to be recognised that they were ignored largely.
Right, but so just on the other two options that are going forward, like for example, flip the season around. Like I remember talking about that in my previous job about 5 years ago. That was one of your recommended, one of your options for an improved season in one of the documents that you released not long ago. The question I'm asking you, the other two, the flip the season around and the even number of provincials, do those two structures take the whole season into account and give every competition its own part? Are you happy with those other two? Or no one's going to be perfectly happy with someone else's, but would you stand over the other two?
Yeah, well, I'll just we didn't leak anything beforehand, right? So there was documents leaked seemingly a month ago there to a newspaper, but that wasn't from ourselves, right? But what we did show yesterday, right, and was correspondence that there is. You're correct in saying, like, if you talk about a flip and a 4x8, right, and our models, which we have two models, and they're openly there. They're on our website, right? And there'll be a tweet or a social media message going out later today with a link to those, right? But they'll show you the two versions that we wanted to put out to the membership, right? And one of those is exactly running provincial leagues in the springtime, taking a 6-week break, April, May, then running a 4x4 All-Ireland series, and there'll be a tier 2 as well, which will have a 4x4, but they will be seeded based on where they finished in their provincials. So, I mean, initially, right from the start, everyone has an opportunity to fight to compete in Sam Maguire, but equally too, it really sort of accentuates the importance of the provincials, which is something that we recognise has traditional value, but this would be a great way of evening that up. Right. So basically, then you would go to 4x4 into quarterfinals, semi-finals, and finals, all run over the space of 13 weeks, and then you're into sort of club season then from week 34 on. And
it is one of the options there, not the status quo, the other two options is pretty similar to that, right?
It's pretty similar, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. So, like, I mean, if you've got one in that you're pretty happy with, why pull out over a status quo one that this might not happen? Do you understand the point I'm making?
No, I appreciate what you're saying, but you have to understand that the mechanics of the GAA will be that those other two versions might never see the light of day. I hope that they do, and I hope that the revelation that we've kind of revealed yesterday will assist in one or two of those other models and even improvements of them reaching Congress floor.
Right.
If we pull out here now, like, I mean, our
so you're doing,
we had a meeting to go to tonight, and it was going to be rubber stamped, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but then thereafter we have lost control and we are out of the process because it goes to Central Council, and and we can either support or not support, but we don't have any votes on the Congress floor, as you know, right?
Yeah.
That goes back to the clubs. We will still, as we see when this report comes out, we will recommend to our members, and we will sort of we will support an option if there is something, but certainly if the status quo is the only one going forward, and we do genuinely fear that is the intentions of the leadership of the GAA. Why would they have brought the tier 2? Why would they insist on bringing the tier 2 through? Why would they insist?
So here, I'll ask you that question, because John Horan is in those task review committee meetings. What does he say? What's his answer to that?
Well, he said from the outset, right? I mean, he said from the outset it was going through, right, and that it would only be in for 1 year. and that if there was a better version that came through, that it would be changed. But all the 3 versions are trying to adapt his Tier 2 into it.
Right.
Not putting in the Tier 2 that I mentioned, right? So it's kind of just trying to hold on to what went through at Congress, which is probably one of the worst Tier 2 type structures that I think anybody would have seen. I don't think there was any support. Certainly not. There was no support from the CPA. There was no support from the GPA. There was no support from the wider, journalists, media, etc. The only support was in Central Council for it. So, John, unfortunately, hasn't been at meetings since the Special Congress, since he got that through at Special Congress.
Okay.
So I can't comment. He wasn't at any of the last 2 meetings I was at.
All right. Okay. So, that's the thing. And just on the other 2, what I don't really want to talk about the status quo, because I would be on the same opinion as you on that one. Why would any status quo even be an option to bring to Central Council when your remit was to come up with something new? I just can't understand how that's even. And I would be just as fearful as you that Central Council will say, well, look, that's great, we're making little improvements. I share the same concerns. I don't know. It's just going to look so bad on them, Micheál, if they do that. This has been a big charade then. Like, how can they stand over this process if after all this talk we're going to get all the stakeholders in, they end up voting what was already there?
Yeah, and I think it would be a huge disappointment to the membership of the GAA. There's massive expectation out here that there is generational change coming.
Yeah.
I don't think the leadership of the GAA sort of realise that. Why would you start the report with nearly 30-odd pages defending how good the current system is?
Is that
if you're putting out a document for change,
yeah,
you would start and say, right, we recognise there's change. All the reports going back that was done on fixtures, go back to the 2015 report that Pádraig Duffy compiled, and he concluded with all the previous different reports that change had to come and that the GAA leadership had to be strong and deliver it. Liam Griffin said yesterday at the press conference too. He openly said he was on the Hurling Development Committee that brought in the change, that brought the Christy Ring Cup, the Nicky Rackard Cup, etc. Right? So, but he said the difference then was Sean Kelly, the then president, got a number of people, including Liam. I think Gerlach Nan was one of them, and there was 4 or 5 others. He got them in, come up with the changes, and I'll back you to the hilt. And he backed them, and he got it through. Right? That's not what seems to be happening here, obviously.
Right, okay, Jesus, very disappointing. Is there a concern that you've kind of thrown the GPA under the bus a little bit here, Micheál, because you're pulling out saying we can't stand over this, and the GPA are just still sitting in there saying nothing?
Well, there's the third levels are in the
the other players' union
as well.
I'm talking more the players' union.
Right, fair enough. I communicate with people in the GPA like Paul Flynn and Ronan Sheehan who is on that committee. But at the end of the day, myself and Michael and Higgins and Michael will partake in the majority of the meetings. Right, we're responsible to our executive and our wider membership. Right, and that's sort of 98% of the playing population. Right. The GPA are entitled to do what they want to do and whether they think to support it. But we genuinely didn't ask them the question whether they would come along with us, because we are kind of a standalone. We represent the Club Players Association, albeit we would have shared views on a lot of things on fixtures, and we're not a million miles apart there at all.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that whatever the relationship between the GPA and the CPA, one thing you have absolutely in common is this fixtures issue, and one thing they're trying to be strong on. I just think if both of you pulled out, they have way more clout than the CPA, if we're being honest, Micheál. You wonder what the CPA's next kind of step is, and without the GPA are much more fearful of them than the CPA, for example, obviously for obvious reasons.
Yeah, but equally too, and some of our members would share the view that the GPA would, maybe be the root of some of these problems, right? I don't share that view. So, look, we would be on fixtures, share certain things, but at the end of the day, we made this decision after last Wednesday's meeting, and we had to be quick to do this because last night, or tonight is the last night. So, we decided, our executive decided unanimously last week, says we were going to do this, and look, as I said, we'll see what happens from the meeting and whether the report goes to Central Council or not this week, and what the GPA stand. But that's for Paul and his committee to kind of look on in isolation. It's not for me to comment on it. And in fairness to him, he's never commented on I suppose, our tactics or strategies either.
Okay, fair enough. What if John Horan brings these three to Central Council? Okay, this is a small percentage chance in my opinion, and they pick, for example, to flip the season. Are you going to end up with egg on your faces then?
No, not really, because if they pick it and put it through, great, right? But we don't, as I said, we don't have votes in Congress. So I think by what we're doing here at the moment, will potentially improve the chances of them bringing, be it the flip or the 4x8 to Congress. So that's what needs to be on. At the end of the day, we're a single ticket, a single issue organised lobby group here, and it's on fixed the fixtures. And if this is what we feel we have to do to get it across the line, hopefully that will happen. If one of those options come in next year, Colin, right, at Congress, right, I will be delighted. Yeah. Every executive member of the CPA will be delighted. We never got into this for position, certainly not for money, right, or anything. Like, we did it on a single cause, and we did it because we said it has to be done, right? And whatever tactic strategy we employ will be just solely to get the fixtures fixed.
Yeah. So, this press conference and pulling out like this is shining a light on what your concern is, with the hope that, it maybe puts pressure on Central Council not to go with the status quo.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, hopefully. I think they're decent tactics. I have to say, come here, just to finish up, the GAA released a statement yesterday saying the Taskforce was expected to develop proposals in a balanced way, recognising and respecting the sometimes conflicting views and the needs of various stakeholders involved and many of the individuals and groups. Was the CPA willing to negotiate and, come back up? Everybody thinks their own structure is the best structure.
Yeah, but I think the fact that we evolved ours right throughout the whole task force based on feedback. I'll give you one example there that one of our versions said, well, look, when you do a 4x4 group in the All-Ireland series, there's no room for New York, and it was told to us you cannot exclude New York. And we said, why not? Like, why can't you have them play the winners of the Tier 2, promote the Tier 2, and get them to go out there for a trip to New York, and that will promote New York football, but they won't be in one of the groups of four. But that was said, no, that cannot happen, right? So it's not a logical argument. Logical arguments were not thrown back at us for any changes, right? We've no sour grapes that it's not our plans that's on the table, but just there was a lot of other plans put forward. No one else around the table put forward plans apart from ourselves. Some of these was worked on, obviously, by members of the committee, but there was a lot of good ones there that were submitted by the public that have went without being sort of seriously looked at.
Right, okay. That seems like a very logical thing to do with New York. They can't travel. They only play one game per year over in New York anyway. So to play the Tier 2 champions and a trip for the Tier 2 champions, this kind of attitude, computer says no. Why? No, you can't do it. Is that what you're up against in there with some...
And, we were promised that everything would be off the table, but now we have nothing against New York or anything or any overseas...
I'd say New York would like that option.
I actually, currently the one that's currently there is never televised. I don't think it hasn't been televised in the last couple of years, so it doesn't get great coverage over this side.
It's an irrelevance.
So I think unfortunately, it might be there just because it's junkets for certain guys, and that's maybe sort of moulding some of the decision making processes that is within Croke Park, and that's unfortunate,
Yeah. Finally there, I won't keep you any longer. Where do we go from here? If this is a case of this goes to Central Council, I share your concerns completely. If this goes to Central Council and they say, right, well, there's been some great incremental changes made over the last few years and we'll go with the status quo, what do the CPA do then? What do the GPA do? I know you can't answer for the GPA, but I'm not going to lie, I will hit the roof if anyone wants to listen to this. I really will, Micheal, and be so disappointed after a year of, being optimistic about this finally changing and all the problems there are with it, for them to come back and say, we'll keep the status quo. I'd be so deflated by the whole thing.
No, and this is why, this is our biggest fear on this, and it's why we did what we did this week.
Yeah.
And I'd say we're not happy to just sit back and sign a report that goes nowhere. So I mean, that's not what we're here for. So what will we do? Look, I mean, like we do every week, and like we did last week, like we'll meet next week, and we'll meet the week after as things sort of kind of develop, and we'll develop those strategies. But we can see from correspondence from our members that they're calling for heads, they're calling for sort of action. So we're just going to have to look at that and see what our best strategy is. But once this happens, people say, well, why have you jumped outside the tent? Well, effectively, as the meeting would have closed tonight, we would have been outside the tent anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So
you're powerless. Yeah, you're powerless after tonight.
We would have been
anyway.
powerless as of tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah.
Now we've kind of shined a light on this, and we're kind of saying, look, please, sort of within the committee, within Central Council, look and sort of see what the grassroots members want and deliver it for them.
Yeah. Micheál, thanks very much for taking the call.
Thank you, Colin.
Jesus, Conor, I don't know. Like, I mean, if this comes to pass, how much have we spoken on this podcast about, well, the Fixtures Taskforce Committee, look, let's wait and see what they say. They're going to revolutionise it, and John Horan's open to it. Now there's a status quo option and a huge worry. And look, to be honest with you, after what we've seen the last few weeks about county boards, the shenanigans, county board officials, do you think John Horan's master plan the whole time has been to just continue it on, but look, let's just under pretense of let people think that we're getting everyone in a room? I don't want to believe that.
Yeah, see, obviously we're just after listening to me all there, do you know what I mean? But that was my sentiment throughout listening to him the whole time, that this is, whoa, this is from the get-go, this has been the plan. This has been like, okay, I'll set up this task force with the kind of everyone having the perception that this is going to fix everything, where all along the plan is to bring in my much criticised Tier 2 championship. And like, I suppose the timeline of it as well, I mean, when the Tier 2 championship was introduced, and you're like, okay, that's only got to go ahead in like October, and then this task force, I think John Horan, you could nearly say he deliberately, because the findings of the task force were going to be released in early January, so people are going to be asking the question, well, sure, we only had that Tier 2 championship a couple of months ago, why are we going changing things again? And maybe John Horan's going to be happy with that all along. But I have to say that just listening to Micheál, it does definitely create that perception that, like, you know, as he said, I think he used the word sold the pup, and I think it's hard to escape that perception that everybody's been sold the pup.
Please say it in, so that's all I'm saying. But first I was thinking, what are the CPA doing? And Micheál has explained that very well, and I actually agree with what they did now. Whereas yesterday I was like, why jump on the outside? Why not wait? One of the other two might. But if the tactics are to create enough of a stir around this and let the public know what's about to happen, that might prevent it from happening. So yesterday I was thinking, Jesus, why are they doing that? They're powerless now, but the fact that they would be powerless tomorrow morning anyways, because this is done, signed, and now it goes somewhere else that they have no say over.
There's no selfish motives in the CPA.
There's no.
Micheál was adamant throughout that the whole point of the way they've acted in the last week to raise the issue now, obviously with the final meeting tonight and then going before Central Council on Saturday, is if they're excluded from the process, but that their ultimate aim of getting it out there that there are proposals there better than the existing one that are going to see the light of day, well then that's their mission accomplished, basically. Like they said in their statement, we cannot in good conscience put our names to such a compromised document. I found that very strong, and this is not said lightly by fellas that are actively looking to cause dissent. At heart, they're GAA people as well. They just want the fixtures fixed, obviously with the interest of the club player at heart. But they did not say that lightly. So I kind of maybe questioned the motives. Why don't you just stick involved with the process for now? But now the way he's put it, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, no, I don't. How is there a status quo left in the three options? See, that's the big one.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you'd wonder how any fixtures task committee would allow this, when you're brought in to change, would allow one of only three options to be to stay the same. That just beggars all belief.
Surely no point in forming a fixtures task force in the first place.
What's the point?
If the ultimate aim is to stick with what we have already.
And we know the resistance to change within the GAA and within the committees in the GAA and within the administrators in the GAA. You've wasted your time. Like, I mean, I didn't say it to Micheál there. They said in their statement, task force members were sent an email on August 1st suggesting three broad options for consideration. So they didn't really have a blank canvas at all. They were given Micheal alluded to it, that they were given kind of options to work with.
Yeah.
Rather than, geez, I don't know if the
and the CPA were the only ones to engage with the process. They were given feedback to work on the proposals that they proposed, and then they were disregarded anyway. And then we said, right, we're going to talk about the three. We're disregarding the suggestions made by members of the public, which the CPA adapted to better the ones that they had already suggested.
Yeah.
So,
look,
it's a big slap in the face to them.
To be honest with you, I don't think I'd last 10 minutes in one of those committees. You wouldn't.
No.
You have to be very political to try and get things to work. And maybe the CPA can be unpolitical at times and say this is what we want. Well, they're a militant group, I suppose. Like that's why we like them. The GPA, I would say, are probably a little bit more political in,
They have to be because they're officially under their wing.
They probably have to be. But I suppose you don't get the change you want. Like maybe the politics is what kind of allowed that status quo to be included in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas the CPA are clearly making a stand that should not be in it, and that's why it's contaminated, and they can't stand over it. And to be honest, if we're looking at percentage chances, I'm looking at an 80% chance this poxy status quo will be the one central council.
No, definitely no. Like
it's not. I don't know why I'm laughing, because it's not funny.
It's very serious.
This is the most serious issue within the GAA. Everything else pales in comparison because of all the knock-on effects, overtraining, the commitment levels, the students and club players and everyone being pulled in different directions, and all the different knock-on effects to your health. All these kind of things. These are fixed if the season is fixed.
It all comes back to the fixtures, 100%.
It all does. And the over-commitment for inter-county players and that kind of thing, you row it back, shorten the season, they get their lives back a little bit more for 6 months. All these issues will be fixed. And Pádraig Duffy talked in 2015 in his annual report. He says there's a great variance in the levels of physical conditioning required to play at different stages of the January to April period, leading to contradictory demands being placed on players. How many times have we said that? January to April is a mess. Now, if they vote through a status quo that does not fix that, it doesn't fix that, what their own Director General was flagging in 2015, this is a disgrace. I can't see, John Horan will leave as maybe the most disgraced president to ever sit as a GAA president if this happens. And that's the truth.
Yeah, no, it's
he
strong,
will be he will be disgraced that he's one Taskforce that was supposed to bring about change, and he pushed through his own agenda the year before, and it was all it came to nothing. Now his tier 2 gets through. Well, maybe not disgraced, but he'll be most laughed at in this studio. Well, let's just say that.
Well, the main kind of the main focus of his tenure, and not just because of his change in the championship proposals, have been to kind of mix up the season from how it currently stands, and that's not just because the CPA was formed, in and around the time that he became president, but it's just that even going back to the strength and conditioning demands, the CPA suggested getting somebody with the sports science background onto the task force, and that was thrown out. Right. And it's just something they said as well. A line that really stood out to me from their statement was, proposals that stand the best chance of getting through the decision-making process at Congress are not the same thing as the best proposals for the future of the GAA. And that's just amen. Every proposal comes with the proviso that whatever you propose, you'll probably have to dumb it down a bit to get it through Congress. And the whole thing with I think you've mentioned this before, but if you put together a fixtures task force, why not place the trust in them? Consider that you have a representative from every group that's of significance in the GAA. Just say, right, we're going to give you free rein, a mandate to come up with a solution that's better than what's out there at the moment, and that it's not going to, that we trust you.
That's what we thought it was.
Not going to be voted through. Not going to have to go through Congress to get voted.
That's like what Micheal was saying about Sean Kelly giving Liam Griffin and Gerard Loughnane, look, ye fix that and I'll leave it to you and come back to me. And that's not what's happening here. It's very disappointing. I think the only thing, if this happens, that the status quo is kept, that the GPA and the CPA have to come together and threaten a strike. Take the power back. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this. How many hoops has the CPA jumped through at Congress and trying to get motions on the floor, and they've gone through the right process from motions starting at the clubs through the county, and they can't get anything. The GPA have been laughed at Congress with their championship structure ideas. They're not being taken seriously. And at what point are the GPA going to return to being a union and to go, hang on a minute, this is one embarrassment for us too far, and forget about the first round of your National League next year? Serious? That's the only thing
I
that's
think
going to change
and,
that.
And I think you've heard some kind of positive soundings from Paul Flynn.
Paul Flynn is a warrior. He's a fighter.
That's what I mean. Yeah, and there wasn't there a memo from the GAA to stop himself and Micheal Briody from discussing
debate,
Tier 2 on RTE as well. So that's another just kind of slap in the face for the GAA. And like, how many slaps in the face are the GAA willing to go out before something radical like that happens? I'd love to see it as well. I'll wait until I see it before I believe it. But if this is going to be the way it's going to go, that's the only way that you're going to enforce change.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We'll wait and see. Might try and talk to Paul Flynn from the GPA. I've sent him on a text message. We'll wait and see. Can we talk to him in the near future? Then again, you see, Paul. I would imagine Paul will wait until we see what happens, which is probably what I would have done.
Yeah.
I'm not, but I understand now why the CPA, did what they did, which I didn't yesterday as much. You know what I mean?
No,
as
absolutely,
much.
yeah.
I was thinking on a different lines. Right. Well, listen, that's all we've time for. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll have a regular Thursday show where we'll preview the weekend's action. So we'll talk to you then. Good luck.